Thanks, Darren. It's good to be on, and this is uh, this is a passion of mine that goes back a long, long time. To I have to tell a story. There was I don't know why, but in Santa Barbara where I grew up, they used to have called the Easter relays, and UCLA, USC, all the big university teams used to come, and it was always around Easter. And there was two guys competing for UCLA, Rayford Johnson and CK Yang. And for some reason they caught my eye and I started following them. They did this, found out they did this funny thing called the decathlon. And then the Olympic Games weren't on live, but there was clips. I don't know if they were even video clips then of how they were friends and how they competed with each other. And Rayford Johnson won the gold medal and CK Young won the bronze medal. And then a year later, there was an hour-long special on one of the TV stations in LA that just got me. I want to do that. But unfortunately, I sold myself short, I guess, a little bit as a decathlete and wasted the subsequent 6 or 8, 7 years playing football and then did decathlon. And this is not about me, but it ignited a passion for combined events. And I guess it's my ADD nature or something that really, really still appeals to me. So we'll start out with a couple of philosophical things. Deep ignorance, I got that. Look for blank spaces, the holes in the knowledge, the answer may be there. The cool part about combined events is for each athlete you have, there are a lot of blank spaces. And so you have to keep looking for answers all the time. So it's not that with a single event, it's not a challenge, but times 10. The right question is intellectually superior to finding the right answer. And I really sincerely mean that is when you look at an athlete, you look at their strengths and weaknesses, a lot of finding the key to the puzzle that's going to unlock their potential is finding the right question. And combined events provide many questions. Let's see here. 10 equals 1, 7 equals 1. That's what we have to remember. We're not doing the individual events. It's the sum of 10, the sum of 7, okay? And making meaningful connections to achieve a desired outcome. The thing that I learned early on when I was trying to train and then in my coaching, that we had to be efficient, we had to connect events. We had to look for connections. And always the goal is what? A higher score. And I remember when I first introduced decathlon to my high school kids, they would look at the scoring table and say, well, if because they were all around 5,100 points when they were starting right in there. And they said, well, if I get this event up, I'll be at, and I got, no, that's not the idea. We've got to achieve some sort of synergy between all of them. I thought I'd give you some perspective. So when you hear me talk, you know, my best score was 5,884 points. At the time, the world record was by Soviet Nikolai Avalov, 8,466 points. So don't ever get the idea that I was very good. I was very fortunate, though, in that I got to train with several world record holders at the time, a lot of, in Santa Barbara, a lot of decathletes that were Olympians, top 10 in the world. So it was quite a learning experience to train with them and to observe them, both up close and from afar as this went on. Sein Kampf, 10 battles. That's the Sein Kampf is decathlon in German, and it's 10 battles. So for me, decathlon was my postgraduate education. I may have said this last time that I did not do track in college. I did track after, and I wanted to be a coach. So it was a means for me to learn the events, to get immersed in the events. And right away, I started to look for connections. Okay, look for connections between events, and see how I could connect the power position in the shot and discus. Seems pretty obvious, but how about takeoff and high jump when we switch to the flop? And so it was a constant period of awakening and lessons. And ironically, when I was training, the athletes that I was coaching, they were junior high and high school athletes. They weren't too much behind me. So sometimes I would actually train with them, and which really created another bond. So let's get into what this is all about. Not going to read off the events, you know the order, but I think that the really interesting thing that hit me, I saw this in an article in Modern Athlete and Coach about 1972, that the total time in actual competition is around 6 minutes. And if you're real slow in the 1500 like I was, it's around 6 minutes. But if you look at Ash and Eaton or Meyer, you know, they're closer to low 5 minutes or even 4 minutes and something. So when you hear commentators talk about the grueling competition is really the time between events and the time you're out on the venue. But the actual time in the events is very small, and the same thing is true in the heptathlon too. I would get my crystal ball out and say that those of you that are listening to this, that within probably, obviously not for the next Olympiad in Olympics, if there is one in Tokyo, but by the time it's in LA, I think it'll be a women's decathlon, and I think you should be preparing for that now by having the women pole vault for sure. So otherwise, that would be the biggest change. So this is the constant, the scoring tables, and as you get into this as combined events coaches, I think you just have to pour over the scoring tables. You have to learn where you get the most return for time spent. Sometimes it isn't worth spending a lot of time on a particular event at a stage in a career when you can bring another event up to a certain level. And those are strategic decisions that I think you have to make to help guide your training. So scoring table is a constant. That's real important. And I always found these, both as a coach and also to begin to teach my athletes, these kind of tables, so that they started to get a feeling for what's 1,000 point level, what's 900, what's 700 point. And I actually, because of the level of athlete that I was working with, would drop it down to 500 point level to see where approximately they would have to be. And I think it helped with goal setting, and helped guide them. And obviously the athlete is going to know the scoring table too, but just to have these general guidelines is beneficial. Okay. So let's look at qualities of the individual athlete. What does a combined event athlete look like? Well, they come in all shapes and sizes. That's for sure. Physical stature, both for the male and female, I think is helpful. You don't see a lot of Jessica Ennis size heptathletes at the world class level, and she was obviously very special and had very special, great coach, and a lot of things going for her. But I think you want to look at physical size or potential for physical size. Speed, strength, and power. To me, I want to see somebody who has really good vertical jump, really good long jump, really good over the back throw. Stamina, not stamina in the sense of somebody that can run a good mile or cross country or something like that, but their ability to recover from whatever they're doing. Like I found a lot of the kids that I had, and when I say kids, these are athletes that went on to score 75 to 700 points. One of them was a Central American Caribbean champion in that, and started these kids and when they were 14 years old. And so could they recover suppleness, flexibility? We discovered that in gym class. Skill level and level of technical development. Well, it was how adaptable they were, how quickly they could learn. The difference between biological and chronological age. Like you think about, I think about Guillermo Sanchez, who went on to compete for Mexico and was Central American champion, didn't pole vault until he went to college and ended up 17.8 pole vault. He was, I don't know what he was, 770 or something in the long jump, so he had the ability to do that. But when I first saw him, he looked like he was 14 years old, but he looked like he was 11. So that difference between biological and chronic, but he was well coordinated. And then their adaptability and recovery ability. Last but not least, cognitive ability. Do they have the ability to learn, and can they give you feedback, because you're going to be with them a lot, and how their ability to learn, their ability to go off on their own and look at video and study the events, I think is really, really an important part of this. So that's something to take into consideration. Okay, so I'm going to give you some what I think are some key points here. Instead of using work capacity, I refer you to one of the podcasts. It was done in the fall because I know we did it in Switzerland. Is this idea of trainability, your ability to train at a higher quality, okay, and obviously your capacity to train a little bit more as cumulative over time. And remember, quality is a measure of perfect, okay? We would like to have high quality sessions. And the biggest mistake that I think I made as a coach in working with combined events was just making the workouts too long, keeping them more on quality, on point, and before things started to erode. Good sound training principles. What's their recovery ability? How can they recover from event to event in training, day to day in training? You want to start taking that into consideration. It's highly individual. And when we look at some of the matrices that I'm going to put up later in regard to the training, this has to really be taken into consideration, is their ability to recover from day to day. Obviously, the goal is to recover from first day to second day in both decathlon and heptathlon and be able to come back the second day. And a lot of that is related to training, but some of it is related to, somebody who's a little bit more lean, fast twitch. They're going to have a little more difficulty recovery. So you have to program accordingly. Establish a simple technical model. Okay, I emphasize a simple technical model. The tendency has always been, and even in the individual events, is to look at the world record holder or somebody like that, and then try to copy them as a technical model. And I think you have to do a little bit of a search and find a technical model that a female model for the heptathletes and a male model for the decathletes. That should be obvious, but back 30, 40 years ago, it was more difficult to do. There wasn't that much video available of the female athletes. And notice I said that a technical model that fits each athlete. Don't try to fit the athlete to the model, adapt the model to the athlete. I think a great example, obviously at the highest level of sport, is Ashton Eaton with a step back throw, in the shot put. And ironically, Harry Mara, his coach, not ironically, we used to train some together in Santa Barbara. And that was something that Sam Adams, the coach there at UCSB, had a lot of the decathletes doing. They just couldn't seem to get in the position, with the glide, and it'd been forgotten. And Harry did it, I think, out of frustration, and that got him another 3 meters, which is a significant point difference. Okay. Hone in on fundamentals first, foremost, and forever. So you don't have to try to make the technical model more complex as the athlete starts to score higher. I think you just want to drill in and hone in on what is going to enable them to, then you can work on getting a little bit stronger and that kind of stuff. One other area that I see a lot of combined event coaches do, and I worked with a woman in 2004 who, and you'll see some of her training, who came here injured with a spondylolisthesis and some other injuries, and looked at her training, and 75% of her training was drills. not full throws, not jumps, things like that. And I think it's too easy to get caught up in drills and not have work on your full approaches, not work on your whole throws and that kind of stuff. So keep that in mind as you go through. Bulletproof them. If you can't make the club in the tub, they used to say, tub being the whirlpool. If you're hurt, you can't compete. And that's my biggest vision looking back 50 years of the whole crew of those of us that trained in Santa Barbara. There was guys that were Olympians, #1 in the world, that couldn't toe the starting line because they were always hurt. And they were always hurt, mostly because of what they weren't doing in workouts to take care of remedial things, and then overdoing the weight room, which I'll talk about later. And I've become very, very big on shapes and postures. You think of all the different shapes and postures you have to make in the duration of the 10 and the 7 events. And I think you have to reconcile the shapes you can make versus the shapes you need to make. And some of that is mobility, some of that is strength, some of that is body awareness. So what I'm putting in now with not just combined events, but other sports that I work with too, is part of warm-up is there's a 5 to 7 minute shapes period, which looks a little bit like gymnastics. And that also can be a really good kind of microdose thing to incorporate with your combined event athletes, okay? Decathlon, heptathlon are speed power events. Don't forget that. They're not endurance events. Train and develop in bite-sized chunks. What I mean by that is if in doubt, make your training sessions shorter. Harry Mara's mantra with Ashton, and I think it should pervade down to even your beginning decathletes and heptathletes, is less is more. Okay, leave them wanting to take another throw, another jump, rather than one more. Okay, and then balance, to me, eventually when you get to the national class level there in the UK, and you guys have some good up and coming heptathletes. I don't know about decathlon. I haven't followed it as coach, but balance and scoring is related to stage of development. When they're beginning, when that young boy or young girl is 14, 15, 16, I'm not going to talk too much to them about balance between the jumps, the throws, and the runs. Okay, we're gonna just start to get a feeling of the rhythm of training, of moving from event to event, and then we'll start after probably 2 years. We'll start to talk about balance. Okay, look at what they have to do to achieve balance. We know there are certain key events. To me, and this is just my observation, the key events for both for decathlon and heptathlon are the hurdles, because that you get a lot of ancillary benefits of rhythm and mobility from those. The long jump, which are both high scoring events, and you get that takeoff right, and you get right in the long jump. That's going to be your high jump. Nobody straddles anymore too. To me, those are the 2 key events that I'm gonna maybe unbalance a little bit. And then for the men, if they've never vaulted before, obviously the vault. But I think the long jump precedes the vault. Like this young man I was talking about earlier, the foundation of his almost 18-foot vault came because he was a good long jumper in high school and in junior college. Objectively evaluate the athlete's strengths and weakness, and that should be on an ongoing basis. I would say mesocycle to mesocycle. So keep track of that. It's always a series of compromises, and I think the biggest thing that I would recommend to those of you working across the spectrum, from the beginning multi-eventer on up to the world-class one, is teach them how to manage their attention. So today we're working on long jump approaches, okay? Those long jump approaches were, you struggle with them, okay? You were all over the place. You're doing them on the track, do some lift-offs, but we're gonna go work on shot. And you can't carry the frustration from the long jump approaches over to the shot. You've gotta shut the door, you've gotta manage your attention, decompress, and focus now on the shot put, Okay, that's been the difference between good and great. You know, I've watched the Bruce Jenners, the people like that, the Daley Thompsons, and that have a bad event, just blow it off and come back and have a lifetime best in the next event. They seem to be able to compartmentalize. So um, look for connections between events. There's a lot of connections between long jump takeoff, pole vault takeoff, and high jump takeoff. So start to, and particularly with overlays of video and things like that that we can do now. Same thing with ending position in the shot and disc and that. Begin to train multiple sessions as soon as feasible. Now, I don't think it's wise to take 14, 15-year-old and start with multiple sessions. Start with 6 sessions a week. And then after about 2 years, if you can give them little homework sessions in regard to technique, you know, for the 3rd year, and possibly by the 4th year of training, then begin to maybe incorporate 2 to 3 double sessions in a day, just to distribute out your work and to get used to the type of energy and effort you have to distribute in competition, in multi-event competition. Okay, competition guidelines. First of all, how many decathlons, how many heptathlons should you do a year? Well, I think some of it. I think at the beginning level, I think anywhere from 3 to 5, 5 to 6 actually could be done if they're spaced out enough. But when I say, let's say multi-event competitions, let's say 3 decathlons, 3 heptathlons, and then I would say 5 or 6 multi-event, 3-event, 4-event type of competitions that you can put together. That's not competing in individual events and dual meets, and that's if you have a squad and you can arrange 4 or 5 people and have like a little mini triathlon, a run, a jump, and a throw, you know, that are scored. I think that's really, really helpful. The old British 5-star scheme from the 60s has some really cool scoring tables on that stuff. I'm sure you can still access it, you know, for youngsters. And then non-multi-event competitions, I mean, eventually, and this is what's been really interesting watching both the decathlon and the heptathlon in the last 20 years, is to see the top 5 in the world be top 10 in the world, and for sure top 20 in the world in some individual events, and be able to actually run the hurdles in the Prefontaine meet or things like that. And that should be one of the goals, I think, is to be competitive at that level. Okay. The next thing, learn to be efficient in warm up between events. The toughest part of decathlon and heptathlon is managing your energy between events, whether it's very hot or very cold. It's a similar type of thing. So that if it's cold, what do you do to stay warm so you don't have to do a full warm up between event? I think also when you're looking for an athlete, you need to find somebody with a more calm personality. That was my biggest problem. I'd get so psyched up that I'd have to do a warm up between events, and I'd watch the other guys that I was competing with, and they were almost comatose sometimes, you know. So you know, obviously a really good warm up before the 100, a really good warm up before the 100 hurdles, you know, and then what do you have to do between events that's specific for the next event to come, but doesn't take so much energy that you're wasted at the end of the day. And a lot of this too is what and when to eat and drink. I'll never forget going to the USSR dual meet in the Coliseum in 1969 in LA, and it was really hot, and it was a decathlon, and watching the Soviet decathletes, they'd finish their event, it was hot, and they would put sweats on, they'd go in the shade, and it's like they had a buffet over there in the shade, you know, after the long jump, before the shot put. I mean, they I don't over exaggerate, but it was almost like eating a full-on meal, you know, and that was a lesson, like, okay, what can you stomach, you know, and then what do you drink? Okay, and then when, in terms of hydration, that's very important. Learn to use microdose sessions. This is something that I did a lot, and I had my athletes do a lot. And it, for me, it was I would do, and I would have my athletes do a microdose session in a gymnastics gym. So it would be, we called it special strength. It'd be about 20 minutes, some on the pommel horse, some on the high bar, a little bit on the trampoline, just some things like that. Or a specific session of throwing a weighted ball for the javelin or something like that. Something to refine technique and refine physical capacities. It might even be something as simple as pull-ups and skin the cats and things like that that could help you for pole vault. But those kinds of sessions, that training is cumulative and it adds up pretty significantly. Then the other thing, most of you probably aren't, I'm making some assumptions here, just coaching combined event people. I never had that luxury until the mid 80s. It was always part of a squad. So what we'd have to do is integrate the combined event training. So if today was hurdle start, say over 3 hurdles, then the heptathletes might have 3 lanes. The regular hurdlers might have 3 lanes, even though the heptathletes might be doing 5 hurdles or something like that. Is efficiently the only way I could do it, or with the throwers sometimes. Though with the throwers, it gets with the it doesn't work as well. But with other events, it does, I think. Now here we go on a couple of pet peeves, and I think this is the biggest mistake that I made as a coach, I made as an athlete, I see people still making. And it's more, I think, of a North American phenomenon than I see a European phenomenon. And let me preface this by saying that in 1972 in Santa Barbara, we had 2 guys from Belgium who were, one of them, I think, I don't want to misspeak. They were both top 10 in decathlon. Barry King from Great Britain, Peter Gabbett from Great Britain, a whole bunch of guys. I mean, in different countries and that. And I watched the Belgians and Hans-Rudy Koos from Switzerland, who eventually became their multi-event coach. And the Belgians and Hans-Rudy hardly spend any time in the weight room. They'd go to the weight room, they'd do 3 sets of 3 snatches, few step ups, bingo. They'd go out on the track, they'd do hurdle jumps, shot throws. That was their power training. We would spend an hour and a half, 2 hours in the weight room. You know, most of us could squat a house, bench a house, and it didn't show up. It didn't show up in the events. So my advice to you is don't get trapped in the weight room. That's part of a bigger picture. Match your lifting to what you're doing on the track and in the field. Okay, so use that to support. Be as strong as you can be, as light as you can be. Because remember, if you add bulk for the throws, you're going to have to project that over the bar, and you're going to have to carry that in the 400 and the 800. So as strong as you can be, as light as you can be. And I'm going to segue here back to endurance just for a minute and then go back. I'm going to say an absolute. When we were training and when I was first coaching, I would have my in that case, my decathletes, we would do half-hour runs 3 times a week. We got really good at running slow. And then later in the 1980s, when I had 2 guys right almost at 8,000, both of them could run. One could run 410 in the 1500 and 48 flat, and the other one 418 and I think ran 46.9 or something like that. The longest we ever ran was 1K, like a cross-country time trial. And then with my heptathletes, the longest we ran was 600 meters. That is the absolute longest. And the heptathletes ranged in from 212 to 217 in the 800. And I just see people putting undue emphasis on those 2 events when there's points there. There's a lot of points there, but you can achieve that through training for the 400 and in the heptathlon, just your overall training. So so let's go. And that segues in. It's easy to get slow. So too much slow endurance work, and this isn't Vern Gambetta's opinion. This is physiology. It's easy to get slow. Okay, if you want to get slow, how quickly do you want me to make you slow? I can make you really slow. I've done a good job of it. Okay, that's not what we want. It's relatively easy to get strong. We can go male or female, go in the weight room and up their numbers in the weight room pretty rapidly. So it becomes seductive. Okay, but it's hard to apply that strength. So what we want to do is do stuff on the field as well as the weight room, where you're going to be able to apply the strength explosively. Okay, kind of a takeoff on the joke of what happens in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas. Often what happens in the weight room stays in the weight room. Okay, and strength you can measure is fine, but they don't add that into your score at the end of the competition. All right. So remember this, and this should be all of your guidelines. To produce max force requires at least 500 milliseconds. It's pretty long. When you look at the events in track and field, everything occurs in roughly 200 milliseconds or less. So what are you doing to close that gap? And so I think there's a lot, we know now a lot more of what we can do with medicine balls, with sandbags, with well-controlled plyos and that kind of stuff to close that gap, as opposed to everything having, I'm not saying don't go in the weight room, but be really selective as to what you do in the weight room there, okay? Strength training, I bastardized Franz Bosch's definition a little bit. Coordination training with appropriate resistance. The girl with the dumbbells overhead is the heptathlete. She had to get fit. She lost about 12 pounds. All of a sudden, what went up? Her high jump. She struggled in the long jump. Her 800 got really good without working on endurance. She'd had a lot of endurance. Her throws went up. Her hurdles went up, and that. Most of her lifting we did, because of the back issue in her case, was with dumbbells. That was to bulletproof her. So again, be adaptable to the athlete that you have. So now we're talking, and Darren wanted me to talk a little bit. If you can put up that first matrix, Darren. Oh, no, not yet. Oh, back. Planning your training and distribution of work. I put these. This is a little mantra. Now you're going to say, well, Vern, you just spent 5 minutes talking about don't do too much time getting strong. When I say get strong, use that as a big, broad umbrella term. Okay, get your ability to handle your body weight. Okay, and this is periodization for dummies. Get strong, get fast, get fit, get specific, and compete. Get strong, get fast, get fit, get specific, and compete. It's no more complicated than that. And now when you look at these various models, this is just a single session, 7-day microcycle model. And I have a period of 2 days of more general type of work, preparation work, 3 days of a little more specific work, adaptation work, and then 2 days of application work. And there actually may be a little mini competition on day 6. Okay, I didn't fill anything in, and you'll see this filled in a minute. Now, here's what happens when you go to multiple sessions on a 7-day microcycle. So you've got 2 sessions on Monday, and notice the distribution percentage-wise of the work. 2 sessions on Tuesday, 1 session on Wednesday, 2 sessions on Thursday, 1 session on Friday, 1 session on Saturday, and 2 sessions on Sunday. And you can manipulate those so between the sessions you can have 24 hours off if you work the workout right. Now this starts to get a little more complex in one sense, but actually it's simpler. And this I would start to go to, you can either make this 10 or 14 days. And this is when I feel like, as a coach with my combined event people, when we got to this model, this is when we had our best our best results, our best improvements, our best training. So you have 5 days of preparation, double sessions. So you do 10 sessions. Now, no one of those sessions is over an hour and a half. In fact, one is an hour and a half and one is about 45 minutes, okay? And then the 6th day is a complete day of rest, okay? So your complete rest. Now you can get, whirlpools, massage, whatever. And then you have 2 sessions, 2 double days, and then a single day, complete rest, active rest, and then what you can do there on day 12 and 13, you could simulate a combined event competition. You could have 2 high intensity days back to back, and then you go back with an active rest day and you start the cycle over again. Now, don't notice I put day 1. What I found, we started this in the collegiate environment. I started so that the rest day manipulated it generally when we didn't have meet. So the rest day was actually Monday, which was their toughest class day. And I think sometimes, I'm going to talk about this in a minute, we'll come back to that, the 24-hour athlete. You can also compress this down into a 10-day cycle. And what a 10 or a 14-day cycle does, you get away, and you'll see this in a minute in the samples I'm going to put up, from this density idea that you're feeling like you have to fit everything in. And it gives you a little bit more time to take your time with events. So let's look at that combined phase distribution, Darren. Okay, so now what I did, and by no means is this gospel, and I threw this together. I didn't want to put up some old training plans from the Paleolithic era. I didn't think you would appreciate that. So even though I'm a dinosaur, I did survive. So I look at, what I did is I divided the year into 3 big phases for you: preparation, adaptation, application. And I put decathlon, and you're going to get this, decathlon, heptathlon next to each other. And the idea, I wish I had a pointer here. The idea of this was, can you see my cursor? I don't think you can, you? Or no, probably not. That each day throughout the year, each day 1 is going to be similar for each phase, okay? Now listen closely. So we're going to work speed acceleration probably every day 1 in decathlon. We're going to work hurdle acceleration in heptathlon. How we work it is dependent on the phase. So in the preparation phase, speed acceleration is going to be standing rollover starts, and basically leading into long jump step checks and that, and then maybe a few half approach jumps, okay? Where hurdle acceleration could be the same thing. It could be lower hurdles, 6 times 5 hurdles, then go to long jump step check, long jump, like that. So as you look through the whole cycle, and we look at the next phase 2, you're going to see that day 3 is going to look the same, but the actual composition, the sets, the volume, the actual means of what you do. Javelin could be short approach on day 4, okay? It could be 3 full throws, depending, okay? You want to go to the next one? Scroll down, Darren. Yeah, so here's that. So you see the same idea. And then if you look what I did here after with the preparation phase, and we're assuming this is winter, hopefully they're still not competing as much. But one thing that I saw some coaches do, and I did, was put a week event work in on Saturday. Special endurance is going to be something like broken 400, 300, 100, a broken 500, 300, 200, or it might be 3 times 250 in heptathlon or whatever. But we'll always kind of at the end of the week, depending on if we've reduced the volume, put some week event work in. Go ahead, next one. And then here, now, I don't have combined event competition in here because I think you can kind of sort that out. Application would also be your competition phase. So if you look at day 6, you're going to compete 3 to 5 events, okay? Whether it's a test effort, and then if it's and we'll talk about a competition microcycle in a minute. I stupidly forgot to put one up, but you can see the same idea. So I hope everybody understands that the theme for each day horizontally across the year doesn't vary very much. And I found that when I was trying to vary it too much, I just confused the athletes, and I confused myself. It just became, because when I was coaching at Cal Berkeley, I had 5 heptathletes, okay, plus all the other events I coached. And so you had to find a way to simplify it, okay? All right, if you could put up the next one. This is John Liraldi, great friend, former assistant coach, lives out in Santa Barbara. He coached at Westmont College, he coached with me at Santa Barbara High School and that. And we won't go through these, but this is kind of the type of, there's kids on here that had never done decathlon. It's a small school, NAIA school. One of them ended up NAIA runner-up at 6,800 points. So you're going to get this. You can kind of look at this as examples. Now, John did it differently. He was coaching. Now, he didn't have them all at one time. They would come kind of in sequence, depending on class schedules. So he had the throws and combined events, and so you can kind of see the different and he delineates the different phases and the type of thing they did. I think what you'll see here, characteristically, and going over with them the other day, there never was a whole lot of time in the weight room, but they went to the weight room almost every day. There wasn't very much endurance work. They got that through the type of work, like here's 3 times 200 with 30-meter fly on the straight, 20 leading into the turn, 25, 24, 23, and the rest isn't specified, but I'm sure that's probably a little bit shorter rest. So all of those things, contribute to the, but I think if you're looking for, don't copy them, but you're looking for examples of types of work to do, this would be a good example. So do you want me to just finish, Darren, and then take questions? Probably best, huh? Yes, no. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay. This is Michelle's training. It came to me with a really bad back, a list of about 20 things that she told me she couldn't do. And I listened and I said, that's interesting because those are all the things we are going to do. And she thought I was a really mean old man for a while, but when she scored 5,800 points, she liked it a lot better. So how I usually set up a mesocycle is a major emphasis and a minor emphasis. So she desperately needed, even though she was coming back off injury. So this was acceleration, mechanics, speed, skill. We did this all barefoot on the grass. Strength training was body weight work and some weight training, a lot of core strength. And then endurance was excessive tempo, but it was repeat hundreds, not longer. Just hundreds at 18 seconds with 30 seconds rest. She'd do a set of 6, 3 minutes rest, that kind of stuff. Try to get her basic fitness up. Intensive tempo would be, we just did some 120s with a little bit faster with a little more rest. Speed endurance, a lot, flexibility. So what would happen if it was major emphasis? That would be like probably could be up to 3 times a week, minor emphasis 2 times a week. Let's look at the next one, see if this makes sense. This is just a 7-day microcycle. She did go 2 sessions. The morning sessions was with a group of soccer players and that I had. She was kind of by herself. And so we distributed that. Notice there's a pool recovery day. Power endurance was, and that was tough. That was um, power endurance in the weight room, and then leg work, and then two pool sessions back to back in that next session. And then this would be a session. We eliminated jogging. It was mini band, hurdle walks over, a lot of crawls for our back, hurdle mobility, core training with a med ball, some balance and proprioception work, strength training, some in-place plyos, and then core work. So this was basically a power strength training session. So that was her morning session. Let's look at some additional factors to consider. Gender. Obviously, male decathlon, female heptathlon. I do think, despite what I said about the weight room, that the female athlete has to strength train. That can be the weight room and other things more often, more frequently, and right on up through almost into the taper. Okay, that's really important. And so that quality is really important. And the type, this kind of power endurance work, maximum reps for, I'm trying to think of the British decathlete that Denise Lewis, I think, is that her name? I think with, oh, help me, the guy who had a British track and field and Dutch guy. I know we talked about this in 2001, and he did a fair bit of that with her, and that will lean up the female. I do think you have to take into account those differences. Chronobiology, this is really different. If you're going to eventually get to the national and international level, you're going to have to, your 100 meters and your hurdles are going to be at 9 in the morning. So you better figure out ways to reset your body clock and find out what you're going to be able, if you're an owl, you're going to have to reset your body clock. And this is not, there's a lot to this that, that more than a week ago, we've all of a sudden in the last 5 years, we've discovered sleep. I kind of chuckle on that. Sleep is really important, but if depending on your constitution, getting sleep between first and second day sometimes is really tough. Particularly, I remember Harry talking about Ashton Eaton. He limited him to 3 questions from the press. That was it. And then they went and they did a pool session, and he was in bed by 11 o'clock, but he had to be up by, I think, 5:30 the next morning. So I think this is something early on to begin to learn about your athletes, okay? 24-hour athlete. You can't be a chump off the track and a champ on the track. So, what's their lifestyle? Are they students? Are they married? And with kids. I mean, that's going to have an effect. You've got to take that into consideration in the whole picture of planning what you're doing with your athlete. Sometimes it's what you can't see that will get you, and it's the iceberg effect, right? And I think that's the whole thing about combined events that makes it so cool, so much fun to compete in, and so much fun to coach, because there's so many variables, and just about the time you think you have it, there's going to be something else that you can't see that you're going to have to address. So I'll never forget reading the account. Bill Toomey broke the world record in 1969, and there was a terrific article in Track and Field News after that. It was kind of the swan. Well, he did one more decathlon, which was my first decathlon the next year. And he finished, he said, "This is the decathlon." He said, "I finished, I knew I'd broken the world record, and I thought of 5 different things I could have done to score 100 more points." And that's and he called being a combined event or being a super schizophrenic. So, that's something to keep in mind. And the mental game part of this is really, really important. And this is what I saw. I was party to be able to watch Ashton Eaton train a few sessions, and both he and his wife, and and that. I mean, mentally Daley Thompson the same way. They were something else, So don't forget that part of it. Okay. I think we're near the end here. At the end of the journey, and this is the most important thing, all physical limitations are eradicated and the athlete's ready technically, tactically, physically, and psychologically to compete to win. And that's what I said. If you can keep your athletes healthy, the beauty of decathlon and heptathlon, they can't help but improve. Who knows where they can go, and that. So that's a big part of it. If you can, join us. It'll be announced tomorrow, actually, the GAIN Masterclass series. I think you'll really like it. We're going to have experts on, a lot of the people that have been on the GAINcast. And if you don't want something free, join us on the GAINcast. And if you want to get in touch with me, I'm a terrible emailer, but I will get back to you eventually. Probably ask you to Skype or something like that. It's easier to do that. I like to see the person I'm talking to. So, well, Darren, thanks. Hopefully there's some questions. I can't see a lot of these, but it benefits more than one event. Absolutely. I don't know if you can see here, and I got to switch takeoff legs because my as I take off, that takeoff position, and I can model that position and get the athlete thinking about it. That's going to be my high jump takeoff, my long jump takeoff, and it's my vault takeoff. So why shouldn't we make the connections between the two? And that's why I think getting them confident and aggressive in the long jump, where they can hit the board consistently and use their speed, and then have that carry over. But that shape is exactly like that, for sure. Yeah, somebody said here about Cliff Rivelto. He's done a great job. Look at his work. Probably more at the close to the elite level in that. And this talk was pointed more toward, the beginning. That's not putting Cliff down. I mean, he's produced some great heptathletes and decathletes. Let's go to how should I do this? There's a whole bunch here. Yeah, Harry said Ashton was 100% healthy and 80% fit. What people don't know in Rio, up to 3 weeks before, they weren't sure he could compete, and they took I don't know how much blood out of his thigh, too. No, that's a good statement, Malcolm. No question. In your opinion and experience, what's the role importance of direct instruction as opposed athletes solving movement puzzles? That's good, because the constraints-led approach is very popular, and I'm assuming that before your athletes start training for combined events, they've had at least exposure to, hopefully, the long jump, to a run, jump, and a throw, where they discover. I don't think there's anything wrong with allowing them to solve some movement problems and to discover, particularly if you're thinking long term. What I found with these were kids when I started coaching 13, 14, 15 at La Cumbre Junior High. If I'd have to drag the pits, if I left the pits out, they would jump all day. They would go at recess and jump, and they would try different things. And I don't think we want to take that joy of movement and discovery away from them by making everything so rigid and instructional. But I think as we get into more and more formal training after second and third year, we've got to start teaching them to, to manage their energy, so to speak. Yeah. Rachel said, look for connections between events. Do you mean that we should use this approach in organizing their training sessions? Yes. So, for example, if you're looking at long jump takeoff, you did long jump first, and you did, say, 8-step jumps. I can't even imitate on my left leg. There's my left leg. Okay, there's my takeoff, right? But now there's my front leg in the shot. Well, it's the same type of thing. Hans-Rudi Kunz, who I alluded to earlier, is a Swiss national events coach, He was a professor at Federal Technical Institute in Zurich, and he did, I don't know, I think it might have been, it was either his or somebody's doctoral dissertation. It's outdated now because the scoring tables are different, but this was before Helsinki, before the first World Championship. And what it was, a correlation matrix, and everything in that scoring table came back to the long jump. And then, you know, and I'm not a big stats guy, but it wasn't too hard to figure out that if I got the long jump and I got the long jump takeoff, then I'm going to learn how to post on my front leg and do that kind of stuff. So that's what I mean by that. Shot put for female heptathletes. Do you think the step back is underrated? I think it's really underrated. I watch these women try to do a glide, and it's so foreign to them that I would do a step back. I also don't understand today with what, you know, now the spin is risky, but some watching Nick Garcia's kids out at Notre Dame High School and watching his teaching progression, that we've always stayed away from that, from the combined events. And ironically, I think some of the women of smaller stature could probably get a lot out of the spin. It's some of the taller women that kind of struggle with the glide that would use a step back. I would definitely consider using the step back technique. I was near the shot put in London final, the 12 finalists. I think there was 3 women with step in the shot put final. I think there was, I don't want to misspeak, for sure 2 with step back technique. Okay, so what's wrong with it? You know, what do you do in a pool session? Run and move. For me, the pool sessions that I put on there are not as formal as they are playful. I just want them in moderately, not real cold water, just moving. That's all I want them to do on that day. As they get a little older, then we might do some, Andy Higgins, who's passed away now, who was a really good multi-event coach in Canada, used to do a lot of his, and they would do actual interval work in the pool. And I just don't think it's time well spent. I don't think you get the return. Grouping events, which do you combine in a session? I would look at the sample that I gave you. Okay, that's pretty typical in that. You spoke about the influence of the scoring tables on training priorities and also about unbalancing certain events. In your experience, have you found that there are specific changes to these priorities? Yes, in the athlete's career. As they get, it's almost like a break point. When they get about 6,500 point range in the decathlon, about 57 in the hep, then I think you got to start becoming more and more aware of bringing because the fear is what you're bringing the strong events down to the level of the weak events, where you're bringing the weak events up. So, for example, one way to do it, I mentioned competition. Maybe you do 3 events on this Saturday, 2 weak events, 1 strong event. You know, in a 3-event competition, something like that, to see where you are. So that's about the break point. And you're not going to be a world-class decathlete or heptathlete. And a world-class would mean, for me, I'd say top, well, depends how you define it. I say top 30 in the world, unless you're pretty close to balance. Although there's some people that still have big discrepancies. Any tips for planning training for combined events in lockdown? Yeah, look at hours of video. Find a hallway where you can model your takeoffs, throw against a wall. Hopefully it's not the wall in your house. If you can get a med ball, you can do a lot of work with that. You can do a lot of body weight circuit work. There's no excuse. I don't know what your lockdown constraints are. Here, you can go outside and run, like in our neighborhood. You could do intervals on the street, things like that. It's not ideal, but want to do something. I know daily, this will burst everybody's bubble. Daly was out at the track for hours, but the actual time that he trained was very little, was very small. He loved hanging out at the track. He'd lay on the pole vault pit and bait people into competition. And you say, Daly says 2 hours max with odd 3-hour sessions. Some of the 3-hour sessions on massively hard on mind and body. I watched him quite a bit of time, and my decathlete trained with him. I seldom saw him in a 3-hour training session. He might have been out at the track, but on that. Now, when he trained really hard and he loved to compete, if he could suck anybody out at the track into a competition, he loved to do that, and that's fine. Bill Toomey was the same way. If he could suck anybody into a comp, that was perfect. So and the interesting thing about Daly in the time that I saw him is he didn't weight train. It was all body weight circuits, shot throws, things like that, plyos and that. Now, sometimes he would do 3 sessions a day. He lived real close to the track in Irvine. So I'm not trying to say he didn't work hard, but 3 hours is a different story.
Cool.
Malcolm,
I'm happy to leave it there unless you see any other questions that you'd like to.
Well, Malcolm mentioned Frank Dick, and obviously I think I mentioned that last week, and Frank's been a big influence on me and Coach Daly and some other combined eventers and that. And certainly we dialogued a lot back in the day when I was coaching my decathletes too, so good resource. He's still there. And that, so I think that should about do it.
Cool. Well, listen, Vern, thank you very much for your time and preparation for this evening and for your delivery. It was excellent. Again, I've got lots of notes to revisit. Everyone who attended this evening, thank you again for signing in and spending the last hour with us on a Tuesday evening.